Thank you all so much for being here. My project is about the persistence of the self in memory, identity, and personhood in dementia. And my mentor is Elizabeth Holmes. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. Okay. So I'd like you all to picture this. Imagine visiting your grandmother, but she no longer remembers your name. She smiles politely, but to her, you're just a stranger. Is she the same person that you've always known? Think a little bit about this and bookmark it, and we'll come back to it. So, my project will examine the ways in which a person's identity and personhood persist, change, or evolve in cases of memory instability and loss due to dementia. And the purpose of my research is to evaluate philosophical perspectives on identity and psychological continuity to understand what it means to be a person and what it means for a person to persist over time. So a brief overview of my presentation will be, I just spoke a little bit about the research question. We'll dive a little bit into the background and then my research and then my analysis of the research, address a few counter arguments, and then a conclusion. So, dementia is a neurodegenerative condition that affects memory, language, reasoning, and behavior, and it can lead to the loss of short-term memory and eventually progress to long-term memory. And some of the physiological effects are neuron death, brain shrinkage, and impaired connectivity. So, what this means for identity and personhood is that when memories fade, the story of the self is disrupted, our narrative is disrupted, and it can lead to personality shifts like changes in mood, values, and behavior, and that ultimately alters how other people would perceive the individual. And so this brings up the continuity challenge, the loss of memory, values, ideas of social relationships, etc. And this all raises the question of whether is this the same person or not. So let's get into the research. The first perspective that I read was Derek Parfit, and he writes from a psychological standpoint. And so the general idea of Parfit's view is that identity isn't equal to survival. So what matters more for the continuity or the preservation of identity is psychological continuity, like memories, intentions, and character. So he proposes a new framework in which we should think of ourselves in terms of past, future, and descendant selves rather than one fixed, unchanging person. So he emphasizes connectedness and continuity, and the connectedness of ourselves, of our past, future, and descendant selves, however evolving over time, are connected, and that's what matters most for survival. So we can be best understood as bundles of overlapping psychological stages, not just single, unchanging selves. Sider also writes from a psychological perspective, and it's quite similar to Parfit, in which he proposes the stage view that we're all momentary stages in time, like we're slices of time, and we're not space-time worms in which we extend infinitely over time, or our identity extends infinitely over time. So Parfit actually had an experiment that Sider talks about called the fission experiment, in which a brain is split into two and placed into two different people. And now what that means is that since someone has a half of a brain, they have access to that original person's memories and experiences. But that also creates a problem of having two people in one place. So how that relates to the stage view is that, of course, there cannot be two identities, two identical identities in one place. So that's why he proposes a stage view of us being momentary stages in time. And our past selves and future selves and current selves are all connected, but they're all different stages in time. The next perspective is from Macmillan, who writes from a philosophical standpoint. And Macmillan studies a case study about Mr. D and Mrs. D. So Mr. D has Alzheimer's and he suddenly does not remember his wife. He introduces his wife as his neighbor. He suddenly treats her with hostility, and his wife is quite fed up and feels that he's a stranger, saying that that man has been dead for 2 years and that he should have been in a nursing home a long time ago. So Macmillan emphasizes webs of interlocution, which are networks of relationships that shape our sense of self, and he believes that that is one of the main factors that can determine whether someone is the same person or not, whether someone's personhood is continued or not. So he emphasizes the knowledge of social relations, saying that that is what is essential to self-understanding. So that brings us to a debate of whether Mrs. D still has duties to Mr. D since he's so changed. Mrs. D believes that he's not the same person anymore, he's a stranger. Um, so does she still owe him the care that she used to? Um, Macmillan says no because he has his webs of interlocution, his idea of his relationships have been entirely corroded. So he's not the same person anymore. Therefore, Mrs. D doesn't have duties. But just bookmark this and we will also come back to this at the end. The next perspective is Luntley, who writes from a philosophical perspective, and he believes that the loss of self stems from the erosion of cognitive capacities. So, dementia leads to the failure to track outer things. And what I mean by outer things is like our tasks, our work, our things that we generally remember. And that leads to the loss of self. So that's his idea of the main factor that leads to the loss of personhood. So for example, when someone says, a dementia patient says, I think I'm thirsty, that doesn't necessarily mean that someone is referring to themselves in an introspective way, but it's rather a linguistic way, like connecting subject and verb, I think. So he believes that without cognitive grounding when it comes to self-reference, um, a person cannot be considered the same anymore. However, he doesn't see it in an end all be all way, so he believes that the more ideas that are retained, the the further the ability to track your outer things, or the less of the ability, the closer or farther one is to their earlier self. So it's a matter of degree, not so much, oh, I can't track my work tasks anymore, so I'm not the same person. That's not what he's saying. He's saying that it's a matter of degree. Lesser is one of my favorite perspectives. He writes from a psychological and philosophical perspective, saying that dementia affects psychological identity, but not philosophical identity. So his idea is that philosophical and psychological identity are already bounded by birth, death, and change. So, what that means is that when someone is born, they're already endowed with the chance that they might be diagnosed with dementia later on in their life. So, it's a possibility that every person comes into life with. So, decline and memory loss are simply part of being human, it's not the end of personhood. So, just because someone is diagnosed with dementia and has undergoes memory loss and will eventually lead to death. Dementia is simply the manifestation of a human liability that everyone has been born with, and it doesn't invalidate one's past life or relationships. And identity does persist in this case. Yeah. Advance directives are legal documents that outline medical wishes, and it designates a healthcare agent to make decisions on your behalf if you can't speak for yourself. So, the reason that this is relevant is a case study that was proposed about um, a man named Al who was diagnosed with dementia. And pre-dementia, Al had written an advance directive saying that should something happen to me, please do not do any life-sustaining treatment, just have it lead to a natural death. But this raises a someone else problem because is demented Al with dementia, is he the same person as Al that had written the directive pre-dementia? And if not, the directive may seem to govern someone else. And the reason that this is relevant is because Al now suddenly says with dementia that he's content and that he does not want to die. So he would like life-sustaining treatment. So the problem here is that do you listen to Al with dementia when he says he wants life-sustaining treatment, that he's content with his life? Or do you listen to Al before dementia when he said that I do not want any life-sustaining treatment? So this raises a non-identity thesis in which some people argue that personhood ends with the loss of complex consciousness, and it suggests that individuals with severe dementia are successors of their previous selves and that they're not the same person. And that eventually raises problems for respecting advance directives and honoring what had been written before. And that is demonstrated in the case study with Al. So, my analysis of this research is that identity is an amalgamation, it's a combination of personal values, relationships, and cognitive abilities. I don't think that lacking a specific one leads to the discontinuity of personhood. So, like memories, values, webs of interlocution being social relationships, I think they all play a role altogether. Um, Absolutely, it's true that dementia reshapes personhood and alters the sense of self. But I believe that people are destined to change. You're not the same person that you were when you were 2 years old, and then when you were 16, and when you're 25, and so on. Everyone evolves, and a shift in your values, a shift in your identity does not necessarily make someone a different person. So I agree with Lesser's statement in which he said that there's changed psychological identity, but there's the same philosophical identity. Some counterarguments that may be brought up is that personhood and identity continue forever by that logic. But I think a line has to be drawn somewhere. When is personhood lost? I think personhood evokes moral status, and when someone is lifeless or brain dead, then it can be concluded that their personhood ceases to exist. The second argument that may be brought up is that identity is lost entirely in dementia because of memory loss, but like I said, identity persists in other ways, and lots of components that make up identity, they all might be changed to varying degrees, whether that's idea of relationships, tasks, values, etc. But that doesn't necessarily mean that identity is lost. It's not an end-all be-all situation. The third one is, again, going back to Mr. D's case study. Since a demented individual has an altered sense of self, their family does not have duties to them. And my response to this would be that children grow and change over time, right? Like a 3-year-old toddler is not the same as a 16-year-old teen version of that child, but parental duties still remain. So I think the same can be applied and concluded for a dementia patient. All in all, concluding from my research, I believe that identity in dementia is not lost, but rather transformed. And this raises further implications in real life and how we tackle this issue, ethically, philosophically, and psychologically. It matters how we treat patients, it matters how we redefine personhood, and it especially matters how we support identity persistence and commemorate and value people's identity and personhood. Thank you so much for listening. Does anyone have any questions?
Amazing, amazing presentations. Thank you for it. I have a question. Do you have recommendations for how family members can stay connected with people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think um, in nursing homes, especially, there are a lot of people that have Alzheimer's and dementia. And, a lot of people think that, these people, they don't remember them, they don't remember their family members. So, of course, it becomes difficult for those family members because you know, relationships are a huge part of ourselves, and when that is lost, I'm sure the other family members feel that way, but I think it's really important that the dementia patients are reminded of their past, whether that's family members, asking about their stories in their life, or actually a lot of dementia patients are able to remember childhood music.
Mm.
That's also done in research that they have the ability to recount certain memories from childhood. So I think reminding them of that, being present, whether that's even putting up family photos in their room or photos from their childhood so that they're reminded of that, even if they're losing their memory, it might help to jog that and give them that sense of self because I think identity and our sense of purpose is really corroded as a result of dementia.
Okay. One last question. What are the next steps for you studying this dimension in neuroscience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think to answer that question, I'd like to talk a little bit about why I chose this in the first place. So my grandmother has Parkinson's disease. She's been battling that for a few years now, and again, another neurodegenerative disease that I've seen has rapidly led to a decline in cognitive capabilities as well as physical. And so I wanted to study that in another capacity, and in this case, dementia and Alzheimer's. And something that I've been working on for a while with a group of friends is like a product that helps to slow down cognitive decline in dementia patients by the form of physical mobility, because that helps with with helping memory in the hippocampus. So my next steps would be to I wanted to potentially interview people that may have dementia in a way that's of course respectful, but just to gain insights and just to gain a more human perspective, because I think scientific research is of course there and through medicine, but I think it's really important to think about the philosophical and the more like humanity side of this, and that further informs how we make decisions in our lives. So, yeah.
Thank you for that insight as well.